How well is The Legend of Vox Machina doing now that the first 9 episodes are out? Pretty darn good. The industry go-to standard to determine the success of on-demand shows is done by Parrot Analytics, which ranked Legend of Vox Machina in its top 10 breakout series, based on it outperforming average titles by a factor of 22.7. That means for every 1 million views that the average series gets, Vox Machina is raking in 22.7 million views. No, that's not as high as, say, Arcane, but Arcane is on another level in terms of story and animation. But hey, Vox Machina comes in pretty darn close. And did we actually think it was going to be anything more than just a silly good time? Speaking of having a good time, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Why not? I am the BookTube Goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. I've been analyzing the story arc of the first season of The Legend of Vox Machina. By the way, this will have spoilers. And I've been making predictions. For example, I predicted that the midpoint was going to be in episode 7, but after watching episodes 7 through 9, I think I was wrong. I'll tell you the exact moment where I think the midpoint occurred and why that may make the next 3 episodes seem rushed. But first, let's recap what happened episode by episode. In episode 7, Scanbo, so guess what? It was a Scanlan episode. Here we start with a flashback of Percy and Cassandra being tutored by the obviously villainous Professor Anders. Remember last week I said flashbacks should occur in Act 1, the start of a story? That's what happens in this episode. In fact, we get 2 flashbacks. The second being Percy's backstory of what happened after he fled Whitestone and how he started on the path of vengeance and created his guns. There's still a teaser that is leaving critters who know the story quaking in their seats that we still don't know the source of Percy's smoky black eyes when he seeks vengeance against those that Percy swore to kill. As Vaxelden asked, swore to who? We also find out that Whitestone mines some sort of mystical ore and that the Sun Tree is being corrupted from its roots deep in the earth. But the second act of the episode is all about Scanlan. His job is to make a diversion so the party can go rescue Cassandra. Now, this was a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. I just don't think it counted as a turning point, so I don't believe this was the actual midpoint. The episode ends with flashing back to Percy meeting Cassandra, only to have Professor Anders immediately slit her throat. In episode 8, A Silver Tongue, we open with Pike back at her temple, where she continues to try to find her connection to the Everlight. So we know that her struggle is continuing. Then we go back where we left off with the main party at Professor Anders' house. We get an epic battle with iron golems or some sort of golems, and Percy finally kills Professor Anders after Anders possesses the party using his magical silver tongue. I think this is the actual midpoint or turning point, the exact moment when Percy symbolically drops his gun and mask in order to go to run to his sister. Considering this whole storyline really centers on Percy, this is a moment where we see that he cares more for his family and friends than he does for his pursuit of vengeance. Then we circle back to Pike with her search to find the Everlight and end with the upbeat scene of Kaelith shaping the symbol of the Dorollos in the clouds over Whitestone. In episode 9, The Tide of Bone, we open with a flashback to the Briarwoods. How Delilah turned Silas into a vampire to save him from dying because of her love for him, which is the center of the whole Briarwood story, that she'll do anything to be with her husband. Flashing forward to the present day, we witness Delilah performing a human sacrifice to summon undead legions, and the rest of the episode is a battle with the undead. But just when all seems lost, they've retreated to the Sun Tree. Actually, they literally retreated up the Sun Tree. We finally get the conclusion of Pike's arc, where she shows up glowing gold and lays waste to the undead. You'll remember last week I said I was hoping she'd make a dramatic appearance and hinted she could be in some sort of ethereal form. That's because that's how Ashley, the player, joined the party when she couldn't physically make it to the campaign while she was shooting Blind Spot. We end with the hook that they find Ripley trapped in the dungeons, and Ripley is one of the people Percy has sworn to kill. So I think I got the midpoint wrong. I thought it would be in episode 7, when in actuality it looks like it was in episode 8, the moment when Percy dropped his gun and mask to go to Cassandra. And I think a lot of that has to do with not taking into account how many main characters we have, and wanting to give Scanlan an episode to prove he's not just around for comedy relief. But since the Whitestone story really centers around Percy, we held off on his turning point until episode 8. What does that mean for the rest of the series? I now am pretty convinced that the final battle, the big climax, will go down in episode 12 rather than devoting an entire episode as a denouement. And I think we'll get a wrap-up or denouement in the last 5 minutes of the last episode. And because of that, I think it will feel as though the ending comes really quickly because we are squeezing Act 3 into 1 or 2 episodes. I definitely think we'll start episode 10 with a Dark Night of the Soul or The Darkness Before the Storm. So what does that mean? In the traditional story arc, after the midpoint, there's a point where all seems lost, which is what I think we'll see in episode 10 and 11 of next week, before things turn around for the climax. If the entire Act 3 is squeezed into episode 12, episode 11 is probably going to look pretty grim. If you watch each episode as a 3-act microcosm, you'll see exactly where the Dark Knight is, or when all seems lost. For example, in the episodes we just went over, in episode 7, the Dark Knight comes when Scanlan is trapped on the roof with the Duke. In episode 8, we see it when Professor Anders has everyone charmed except Percy. In episode 9 is when the entire party is driven up the Sun Tree and they are surrounded by undead. And in that episode, we especially know it because everyone is saying goodbye to each other, like they're expecting to die, and even Vax decides that he's going to tell Kaelith that he's finally in love with her, so she'll know it before what looks to be certain doom. Normally we see this around the 3-quarter mark, but again, because there are so many characters and subplot to squeeze in, room is made for things like the Pike subplot, the Briarwood subplot, the romance between Vax and Kaelith, and on and on. But generally, I think this is following a traditional plot structure. So next week, my prediction is that things will start looking really good for the Briarwoods, especially in episodes 10 and 11, and not so good for the party until a twist happens that turns the tide and the Briarwoods are defeated in episode 12, with the last 5 minutes of that episode devoted to a denouement, which maybe has a hook to season 2. If it happens like this, I think if you rewatch the series from the start, you may find that the ending happens really quickly and kind of wish that there was just one more episode to wrap things up. I think the middle may seem drawn out because they stretched the middle to include development of all the characters, all of them except for Vixalia and Grog. And they're certainly there, but they don't get as much special treatment in terms of story as the other characters. Oh, and what about Trinket? We didn't even see him this week. But this makes sense, honestly, because there's too many characters to give everyone a subplot in a 12-episode series. That said, I'm still keeping an eye on the interaction between Percy and Vixalia. I think they probably could have cut episode 7, the Scanlan episode, just in terms of storytelling, because really the entire episode is devoted to just creating a diversion for the main party. But let's face it, we all love Scanlan, and I would rather the middle feel a little soggy than lose such gems as Scanlan singing the spells from his scroll. I'm kind of worried that if everything is squeezed into the last episodes, that there won't be much falling action, which gives the audience a little time to absorb what just happened, which is why I was hoping that episode 12 was devoted to a denouement, but I've been wrong before, so I could be wrong again. There's plenty of callbacks for the true critters out there. One thing, which we'll have seen before, is a bag of holding. I kind of love how they just make no big deal out of it. They just occasionally show it, people shoving things in or taking things out. As I said before, Pike showing up as an astral projection was exactly what I was hoping for. And let's face it, the entire Scanbo episode was a gift to critters everywhere. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite parts were. I don't think this series is perfect. I thought things like Vax going to an 11 and threatening to kill Percy was a little jarring. And there were a couple of other moments like that where I thought the character emotions ratcheted up a little quickly, but overall, I am still on board with the series and I am really looking forward to the conclusion next week. I also do analysis of story for Critical Role Campaign 3, which just had an amazing episode at a ball this week. You can see one of those videos right here. Until we meet again, may all the books you read and campaigns you play in and their adaptations be blessed.